Hi everyone, good afternoon. It is Sarah Shipton here from Scrapbooking with Sarah, and I am coming live to you today on April 21st with this week's Technique Tuesday, and we are creating a double page scrapbooking layout. I'm super excited to share this layout with you today because it's got lots of different techniques on here. And it has been really fun creating with this particular stamp and die set. This is the second week I've created with this particular stamp and die set now. And I am excited to share the techniques on here. But the main technique that I'm going to be demonstrating to you today is how to create this border frame cutout for your scrapbook layout. Now, we've got Pauline watching from Canberra. Hi, Pauline. How are you? Happy Tuesday. Thanks for joining us live today. I have upgraded my phone, which I'm very excited about. We had some horrible background scratchy noise happening on my videos, which I was unaware of because I don't quite often play the videos back myself. And so I had to madly upgrade my device last week, which we did on Thursday. Miss Kath from Adelaide is joining us live today as well. Hi, Kath. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you're excited to see a nice, fun, grungy boy scrapbook layout this week. And I have been away over the weekend celebrating our daughter's bridal shower, which is very exciting. We had a lovely afternoon at a winery in McLaren Vale, and we spent the weekend in a beach house at Aldinga Beach with her bridesmaids. So I have had 4 days off, and let me tell you, I really needed a day to recover after the weekend's festivities. I think I might be getting on, girls. So let's get into it. We are creating a double page scrapbook layout this week, and I am working with pattern 4M, which is on page 64 of the Reflections Scrapbook program. If you don't have a copy of this book, I have posted the pattern in our Facebook group, Scrapbooking with Sarah Shipton. You can purchase this book on Amazon as well. It is an older how-to pattern book, and we are going back to basics with our scrapbook layouts. So this particular pattern here is a very easy pattern to recreate. I know that you're looking at this and thinking, wow, this looks super decorative. But in terms of the base of your layout, I have actually turned this single page master pattern into a double page layout. So you are going to need 2 sheets of either cardstock or designer series paper for your base. I have opted for cardstock, and I've actually got my layout in a memory protector because I've got some flip flaps on here. But you know what? Let's take it out of the flip flap so we can get rid of that reflection, and we can have a close-up look at all of the beautiful techniques that I've used on my layout this week. So I've used 2 sheets of cardstock. This is the Night of Navy cardstock, but I've used the lighter side. This is 2-tone cardstock. So I've just turned that over to make it a little bit lighter and coordinate the blue with the blue in my bicycle here. These photos were taken a couple of years ago in New York City. I was just thinking, oh my gosh, my journaling, where is my journaling? And that's right, I've got a special technique I'm going to show you for my journaling this week. I'm getting a little ahead of myself there. So your 2 pages for your base scrapbook layout, then you're going to need another 2 sheets of either designer series paper or cardstock to create your frame. So I've opted for 2 sheets of designer series paper here from the Exploring Nature designer series paper pack. And this is part of the Nature Walk suite that I'm sharing during the month of April. And that is all you're going to need. So 4 sheets of either paper or cardstock in total, 2 matching for your base, and then 2 here for your frame. So what we stick, and then you can actually see the bottom of the cardstock underneath as well. So my photos are actually stuck straight on the base page of the cardstock, and then I've got this frame that's running around the outside of my photos. So we are going to get straight into doing the cutting for the frame, because that is literally it in terms of your papers. You're going to need your Stampin' Up! Paper trimmer, and I'm actually going to just use this sheet of old olive cardstock. This was actually the technique that I demonstrated last week. So I'm actually going to cut my frame out of this particular sheet of cardstock first of all, and then I've already stamped, as you can see here. I've got this stamping that's running down the left-hand side of my page. This is what I demonstrated last week. So I quite often use what I'm demonstrating in another layout a little bit further on. But the first thing that we need to do, our frame piece of paper, I'll bring this one back in, this frame here, we need to cut that paper down to 11 by 11 inches first of all. So I'm going to open the arm of my paper trimmer here, and obviously when we cut this down to 11 by 11, we are going to take off a fair bit of that pattern. We probably will lose it all, but that's okay because I can use that on another layout. So I've got a 12 by 12 sheet of cardstock here. I've popped that in my paper trimmer. You need to lift your guard rail up. I'm lining my cardstock up at 11 inches. I'm going to pop my ruler down and then pull that blade down, and that's actually going to cut my cardstock. So we're going to trim this down to 11 by 11. Oh, I'm still going to keep the stamp side actually, Sarah. I didn't think about that very well, did I? Because I've taken 1 inch off one side and another inch off the other side, and that has left me with an 11 by 11 inch sheet of cardstock. Now, to create this border, I've actually got a 1.5 inch border around the outside here. So to create the border, what I'm going to do, because this was an 11 inch, this is now an 11 inch square, I need to leave a 1.5 inch border around the outside of my square. So I'm going to trim this. I'm going to line this up at 9.5 inches. So I'm going to come in 1.5 inches from the 11 inches. I know that's a bit of math there for you girls. And then I need to, before I put my ruler down, I'm going to slide my blade down 1.5 inches. So there's actually some, let me pull this up so you can see this a little bit closer in the video. There is actually measurements on my trimmer guide, okay? And there is a little line on the top of my cutting blade here where I can use this, or I'll bring this down a little bit into view. I can use this line on the outside of my cutting blade, and I can line that up with the measurements on my ruler there, okay? Just in case you're wondering why you've got those measurements on your trimmer blade, that is the reason being. So I'm going to line that up here at 9.5. I'm coming 1.5 inches away from the 11. And then here on my ruler guide, I'm going to line that up also at 1.5 inches. And I'm going to bring my ruler guide down to the 9.5 here. So I'm leaving a frame around the outside of my cardstock. So I've brought that down to 9.5 inches, and you can see here it's just cut a slit. Okay, so here's my border, my first side of my border. I'm taking my cardstock out of the ruler and turning that on its side, and I'm going to do the same thing on all edges. So we're lining this up at 9.5. When I shut my guide down, because I've brought the blade to 9.5 inches on the outside here, when I pop that down into place, that's already going to be lined up at 9.5 inches. So all I need to do is come all the way back up to the top here, and I can line that up with the 1.5 inches, or I can see here where the line is on top of my trimmer blade. I can line that up with the cut that I've already made previously. Okay, I hope that is making sense to you. Give me a thumbs up or pop in the comments there below if you are following along. It's so funny because when you do this without talking it through, when you've done it so many times, you literally just like go into like sort of automatic mode, and I have to really think about it when I'm demonstrating this and talking out loud. So I hope that you are all following along there at home. So I've lifted my trimmer guard up, and I am just turning my cardstock onto the side again. I'm going to line the edges up here at 9.5 inches. When I put my guide down, my blade is already going to be where I've left it from the last cut, at 1.5 inches down. And so I can just slide my trimmer blade through the guard and bring it down to 9.5 inches here at the bottom. Lift that up. You can see here that that's cutting perfectly here. This would be a fun sort of technique as well, creating a little pocket lift there for your memory protector. Here we are lining up again at 9.5 inches. I'm closing my trimmer blade over and bringing the blade up in the ruler guide back to where I've cut before. And if I've done that perfectly, this square should just pop out beautifully, okay? And what you've ended up with here is an 8 by 8 inch square. And in your instructions that I've posted in the Facebook group, it says to cut an 8 by 8 inch square from the center piece, leaving a 1.5 inch border. So that is how you create that border on your cardstock with your paper trimmer. So these bits of cardstock that I've cut, I can put them to the side and I can use that for another scrapbook layout. And here I have actually got my border or my frame. If I was to put that over the top of my cardstock, you can see that that is matching perfectly. Now, if by any means here, you can see here I've cut over a little bit too far, and when I've pulled that out, I've torn the cardstock. The fun thing with this particular technique is that you can create a border, a die cut border, or you can add an embellishment cluster so you can cover up any mistakes that you might have made with your cutting. The fun thing that I love about this with this frame is I've now got a frame where I can duplicate this stamped pattern around the top and the side and along the bottom as well. So I've ended up with a bit of a stamp pattern, but also some of the plain green or old olive cardstock, I should say. Okay, so that is how you create your frame pattern. Now, if I was to put this onto a sheet of cardstock, you can see here, I've actually got room on the inside now for my photos. So the instructions from the pattern are using a 7 by 7 inch photo, and that's how you have ended up with a frame around the outside of your photo. This particular pattern here, they've actually put some cardstock, they've stitched cardstock over the top of this frame, and so you don't see the gap between the base of your cardstock layout and the frame itself. Whereas I did mine a little bit differently, and I've actually cut all of my photos. These were 4 by 4 inch photos. Now, if I had stuck these 4 by 4 inch photos in here, then you're not going to end up with the color coming underneath from the base of your scrapbook layout. So these photos, so let me just jog my memory. I'm pretty sure I've cut these at 3.5 by 3.5. Yes, I have. So I've cut my photos at 3.5 by 3.5 inches, which is not traditionally a standard scrapbook size photo measurement. It would be 3 by 3 or 4 by 4, but I've cut them at 3.5 by 3.5. And then I have been able to have a border around the outside and then also through the middle here of my photographs. So I can see the blue coming up from the bottom, and I've got this pattern frame around the outside. So my tip would be to cut your frame first and stick this over the top of your base scrapbook pages, and then put your photos in next, and then do your embellishing around the outside. So let's go through in a little bit more detail how I have embellished this particular layout and some other techniques that I have done. So let's start in the top left-hand corner here, and we can work our way around. So with my embellishment clusters, I have actually brought in a stamp and die bundle set. Now, I did demonstrate this last week. I actually stamped this last week. So this is how I've ended up with this lined stamp around the border of my old olive cardstock. Now, this is, oh my gosh, this is called the Gears and Textures bundle. Now, you can buy this stamp set on its own. You can buy the dies on their own, but when you get it together as a bundle, which has both the stamp and the dies, you do save 10%. Now, the reason I've invested in the bundle is I have a son and a husband, so I do have lots of boy-themed scrapbook layouts that I like to do, and I love that this particular set pays homage to that. Last week, I scrapbooked some ATV riding through the jungle in Ubud, and this week, it's actually me, but we're doing some bike riding in Central Park on just an e-bike, nothing too exciting, not really muddy. But I love that you can be quite decorative and grungy with this particular set. So what I've done here is I've done a combination of just some of the dies that I have cut out, and I've done that in this top corner as well. And then in some instances, I've stamped on the cardstock and then cut the die out. So it is quite decorative. The way I like to see this is that if I'm going to be running dies through my Stamp and Cut and Emboss machine, and I'm working with, you know, quite a big base there, if I'm going to be running these dies through my Stamp and Cut and Emboss machine, then I typically like to die cut lots of dies. And in fact, most of the die cutting for this layout I had actually done the week before, because I also used this set on the previous week's layout. If I've got any extra dies that I've done, then I will typically, as you can see here, leave them in the pack, so I can open that up, and voila, surprise, here are some that I've prepared earlier, and I can use them on my future scrapbooking layouts. So if I'm running through my base of my machine already anyway, I like to make best use of my time and my productivity and do lots of cutting all at the same time. So we've done some die cutting there. We've also done some stamping and some die cutting. Let's talk now about this border. How fun does this look? This is actually the really cool thing that I love about Stampin' Up! Is that some of the stamps that you will use coordinate with the die. So you can see here that I've stamped this bike chain stamp on my cardstock, and then using the coordinating die, I've actually cut it out. So this die here has the frame, which I've used, and this die would actually cut out the inside, so then you'd have all of these tiny little individual holes in your bike chain. So it just depends on what kind of look that you are going for. It meant that I had to stamp these. These actually measure 4 inches in length, so it was perfect for my border. So 2, 4, 6, 8. It meant that I had to stamp and cut them individually 16 times. And I have to say, I am thrilled with how my layouts turned out. I don't always do super decorative layouts with lots of stamping and lots of die cutting, but I did have a little bit of extra time on my hands last week. And I already had some of these pre-cut from my layout the week before. So I was able to be extra decorative with this layout this week. Okay, so You hear me quite often talk about scrapbooking. The three biggest objections people have will be time, money or budget, and then also their creativity level. And so if I don't have a lot of time and I'm doing a layout, then you can get a layout done in literally like 15 to 30 minutes. It doesn't have to be super decorative. If I've got a little bit more time, then I like to be a little bit more creative with my layout and do some added embellishment techniques. So we've got some stamping and die cutting there. In some instances, we've got just the die cutting. So this fun little bike chain that I've put underneath here. Now, for my title, I have actually demonstrated this stamp set before in a previous video. This is a new simple alphabet stamp set. This came out in March, but it is actually going to be, it was one of the online exclusive products for March. It is going to be carried forward into our next May catalogue. And this particular stamp and die cut set is in the existing April catalogue, but this is going to be carried forward into our May catalogue as well. So super exciting there, which is why I opted to use these products on my layout this week. Now, with the alphabet stamp set, the thing I love about that is that you can custom create your own title, as I've done here, bike riding in Central Park. Now, with this particular stamp set, you can stamp straight on your cardstock. In this instance, I've actually cut my cardstock down to 1 by 1 inch squares, and I have stamped the alphabet on the squares using my Mossy Meadow ink pad and the simple alphabet stamp set. If you look super closely on each of the squares, I've also stamped some second generation. So rather than the cardstock being just play grey granite, I have also done some stamping using the Gears and Textured stamp set and the grey granite ink pad, and I've done some second generation stamping. So what you do there, you can only very faintly see it, so it's meant to kind of look light and grungy. I've actually stamped off my page onto my grid paper or my scrap paper first, and then I've stamped onto the cardstock. And in some instances, I've stamped off the edge as well, so it doesn't cover the whole square itself. So I've cut all of my squares down at 1 by 1 inch. Then I have stamped second generation on each of the squares. Then I have stamped the alphabet on each of the squares. And then using my sponge dauber, I've actually got my sponge dauber here, and using my sponge dauber and my Mossy Meadow ink pad, I've actually sponged around the outside of all of the squares. So really a 4-step, I guess, system or technique there. So quite decorative and obviously a little bit more time consuming. As I mentioned, I don't do every layout super decorative like this, but I did have a little bit of extra time on my hands. So I was able to be a bit more technique-y and detailed with my layout. With my layout this week. Now, what else have I done? I have used some of the leftover stickers from my scrapbooking workshop kit. So this sticker sheet was from the Exploring Nature scrapbook workshop kit. You make 3 layouts with the kit, and then I have had leftover stickers. So what I like to do is use up the rest of my stickers and use up the leftovers from the scrapbooking workshop kit. I often pair it with a second pack of the papers, and then I will create extra layouts during the month and use up all of those stickers. So we've got one more layout that I'm going to be sharing with you for April, which will be next week, and I'm going to use up the last of these stickers here on my next layout for April. So you can see some of the stickers I've brought in here. Outdoor fun. I've got a little white sticker here where I've just put the date on it, which is when we did the bike riding, or I did the bike riding in Central Park. I have to say it was a little bit of an effort to get the bike up and going, we had to download an app. We had to link a bank card to the app. It was a whole like saga. And by the time we figured one out, I had already chewed through like 10 minutes of the bike riding. So Darren said, you go for a bike ride, take some photos, and I'll just sit here and wait for you. So we didn't bother both going for the bike riding, and I just went on my own for, well, it ended up only being about a 45-minute bike ride by the time I got organised and took off. So I went through one section of Central Park doing the bike ride. I went to Strawberry Fields, which is the intersection of Central Park West and West 72nd Street. I went past the Naumburg bandshell, the Falconer sculpture, the Bethesda fountain, which unfortunately was off and no water in it. And I also mentioned the Strawberry Fields. I have used flip-flaps on my layout as well. So I've put some extra photos in there. And all I've done here is cut down some 4x4 squares using the same color cardstock to match, which was Night of Navy. And then I've cut my photos down 3.5 by 3.5, and I've stuck those photos back to back on each other there. So what's that? This is the San Remo. This is Cherry Hill, which overlooks that lake and the San Remo. And then where else did I ride? I went past the Daniel Webster Monument, and that was just a beautiful view of the park. So just a little tip there with your flip-flaps. You want to think about which way your flip-flaps are going to flip. In this instance, mine have flipped down. So my photos are actually upside down. So a tip with that is I'll stick the first photo on and then I'll flip it as I would be doing in the actual flip flap. And then I will stick the other photo over the top. And this was actually 2 4x4 squares that I've stuck back to back. And the reason for that being is that if I had flipped that down, this would have a different tone of cardstock. It would have actually been the Night of Navy cardstock on the back. So that is why I've cut 2 4x4 squares here and stuck my photos over the top. So when I flip that down, the color actually matches the cardstock that the base pages are on. Now, what else have I put on here? I've also put some of my streaked dots, which were in the last chance section. And I've put some of these little dots here, as you can see, on my embellishments here. We have a combination of black two-tone cardstock, some Night of Navy cardstock, and this blue you can see is a little bit lighter. I've actually used some scraps of my designer series paper from the Exploring Nature paper pack, and that's how I've ended up with some of these lighter blues over the top. I just wanted to put that on there to break it up a little bit so the embellishments weren't so dark. And when I'm doing my embellishment clusters, I like to sort of start with some bigger ones, sit some smaller ones over the top of them. It is a little bit of a process building them all in. And then you can see some of these embellishments I have used either my mini Stampin' Dimensionals or my larger Stampin' Dimensionals. These are self-adhesive foam mounts, so they add dimension. And in fact, all of my 1x1 squares have actually been used with the Stampin' Dimensionals there as well, just to have them lifted up. And I think that is all of the techniques. There was quite a lot on the page. The only other thing that I wanted to share with you was a journaling technique that I've used. Now, for those of you that scrapbook your travels, I want to introduce you to the 3 banner punch. I'm obsessed with this punch. I have actually demonstrated this a couple of times before in some other videos. Let me just grab some scrap paper here, some of my scrap cardstock. So with the punch, firstly, you've got this little clasp which actually holds the punch in place. I used to use a lot of punches in my scrapbooking, and then when I transferred over to Stampin' Up, you can see the thing I love about this is you're actually going to punch out 3 different banners. So you're kind of getting 3 for the price of 1. But what I love about this is I can pop my cardstock in here, and when I punch those out, like so, I'm actually getting 3 different size banners, and I would probably use the lighter side there because this is great for journaling. So for those of you that like to travel with your scrapbooking, sometimes I will journal a little journal box or a journal square, and this was really just, it is what it is. I've got my tidal bike riding in Central Park. A fun story would have been the one that I shared with you earlier about trying to figure out the bikes. That would be like a storytelling type style of journaling. But in this one, I just wanted to do like some factual journaling. And so what I've done is I've punched out a whole heap of these little banners, and I've actually put them on my layout, and I have actually labeled each of the places in Central Park that I visited. So for those of you that love to travel, that style of journaling is really great for sightseeing, monuments, statues, touristy type places. So rather than doing like a storytelling style of journaling, I've kind of done like the location type, or the who, what, where, when, and why. So I've got my date, and then I've used these little banners and I've journaled on them just using my journaling pen. And if you look really closely, I've ink sponged around each of the little strips just to help them stand out a little bit more. So I've stuck them on top of the photo of the places that I visited in Central Park. And in this case here, also these photos that are going to go in my flip-flaps. So they are all the goodies that I'm sharing with you today, and I hope that that has been helpful, learning the technique of cutting the frame. I think this would be one that you could recreate really quickly and really easily. You could keep your photos. You could definitely just have your photos at 4x4. And you could actually meet them together so you don't see the color, but you would still have the frame around the outside. So a really quick and easy scrapbook layout. And I think that's probably why I spent a lot more time doing the decorative and the embellishing process, because the actual paper piecing and the photo cropping was super quick and super easy. So I spent more time embellishing and decorating my layout. So I hope that that has been helpful for you today, ladies. And I can't wait to see what you come up with this week and see the beautiful frames that you're going to be cutting. I will be posting links to all of the products that I've shared with you in the video today. Have a great week, everyone. Thank you for watching. I can see a couple more of you joined today. Hi, Doreen. Hi, Emily. Thanks for being part of the live video. I will post this to our Facebook group shortly and also upload it to my YouTube if you watch there. Have a great week. I can't wait to see what you ladies create. Bye for now.